Today, we would like to introduce the career story of an engineer who came to Japan from America. He had no experience in IT industry and started his career as an IT project coordinator using Japanese and English. And he's now working as Python engineer. So the highlight of this story is that he took opportunities by cultivating his programming skills by utilizing his free time, and also he acquired work skills on projects at the same time. It will also be helpful to see how well he has applied his experience to next project. So before moving on to presentation, you can find the links of Avinton website and SNS in the summary section, so please don't forget to follow us. Now let's move on to the presentation.
Hello, I am here today to talk about my experience working with Avinton, coming from a non-technical background and now finding myself hopefully on the path to being a software engineer for my long-term career trajectory. So a little bit of background about myself first. I'm currently 31. I'm originally from New York City, and I joined Avinton back in August of 2019. And so for a little bit of my academic and professional background, in college, I'd always been interested primarily in history and politics and economics. So in university, I studied political economy, or those of you who are familiar with more British models of education, you might know that more specifically, it's a program called Philosophy, Politics, and Economics, which is famous in Britain because it's what all of the the posh politicians study at Oxford and then become get into politics. And I thought I would probably end up being a lawyer or a diplomat or a professor or something of that nature. And so after, but I somehow didn't really enjoy the kind of day to day of what those kind of jobs would be into. So I sort of didn't really know what I was going to end up doing. So after I graduated from college, I worked in IT in New York for a while, basically fixing computers and troubleshooting software and all that stuff, because I also have a background in music. Oh, skoshi hayai. I also have a background in music and digital music, so I was always able to like troubleshoot my own stuff, and then my dad's a sound engineer as well, so I kind of had that kind of background as well. So I did that for a while. Ended up learning some really valuable skills, and was working on artistic projects at the same time. And then eventually, through some kind of random circumstances, I went on a trip to Japan, and I really liked it, and I decided to move out here. And I went to Japanese language school, and after that was done, I found that Avinton was hiring for a project in the telecoms industry, and so I was able to join Avinton. And in terms of my background in programming, as I said, I had a fair bit of experience, working with software and hardware troubleshooting. Like, I could use a command line, but for programming itself, it really had never been exposed to me in a way that I was interested in pursuing it. The only thing that I'd ever done was in my college days, I took a class in statistical analysis where they taught us how to use the R statistical package. In retrospect, I wish they would have taught us Python at the time, because you could do basically all the same stuff that you would do in R, but it's also a general purpose language, so I might have been more interested in that. But that's another story. So, as for the company that I'm currently assigned to, um, it is a leading provider, global provider of telecoms hardware and services that works with mobile operators all around the world and with some of the large Japanese operators as well. And what I'm doing for them is that I'm working in the systems integration team, and I'm writing software to automate the operations for our client, which is one of the Japanese operators. So, for example, what I'm currently working on is a tool for when that operator needs to make a new node in their system. It automates the checking that all of the parameters are correct. And then there are other modes for that tool, which are if they have to change the settings of that node, then there's a very specified system that we have to follow. And so were you to check that system manually and check all of the parameters, it would be an extremely high workload. So this tool is to automate that process. Before the current tool that I'm working on, I made another tool which compares the state of a radio node with one taken from a log of another one, which is more complicated than it sounds because there are tens of thousands of parameters, plus the configurations can be very different. And so knowing how to compare those logs is actually a much more complicated problem than it might sound. That tool is actually now being used by teams from within my company in multiple countries, and they're because it doesn't really have anything specific to the current client. It can be used with mobile operators around the world, so there's a chance that it will spread to other teams around the world. And then the other large part of my job is that we have some legacy code that is kind of written in a way that's inefficient and hard to update. So I'm mostly using Python, rewriting that so that they can be used in the long term in a more efficient way and easier to update when we have to accommodate new hardware and new software. So next, I'd like to discuss a little bit about what my work history is before I joined Avinton. So as I said before, after I graduated from university back home in New York, I was doing different artistic stuff while at the same time working in IT, basically working at a computer store that had, well, it was a computer store, but it also was like an IT services provider. So we worked with, huge companies, the major American networks and stuff, and we repaired all their TVs and set up all their servers and more like kind of like pro audio and pro video stuff. So we managed all those contracts for that. So, it's not like I had zero corporate experience, but it wasn't anything particularly technical beyond, OS level troubleshooting and setting up pro video software and all that kind of stuff. And again, I hadn't really got into programming at the time, but I did become really good at troubleshooting methodology because we had a high volume of repair and stuff, and so you really needed to learn to kind of triage, and it was a big advantage in that job to be able to troubleshoot things very quickly. So I would say I got quite good at that. So then in 2017, came to Japan for about a week, really liked it, decided to come back and see what it would be like to live here. and was working on my fashion brand as well, and also some musical aspirations. And so I was doing all that stuff and going to Japanese language school. And so, yeah. Then I graduated from Japanese language school, and I found via a Facebook group for foreigners in Tokyo that Avinton was hiring for a project for um, a telecoms project, essentially, I think we could say, for a project coordinator. And at that time, it was mostly that I would be doing things like translation and more project coordinate. My my title was a project coordinator, but I was doing less technical things. And so what I ended up mostly doing is that I ended up managing the on-site testing for this telecoms project. And that was a really cool experience because it was an unbelievably international team. We had people from probably like 15 countries on our team, and you know, lots of different languages, and it was a really interesting time, and it was also some really exciting new technology, and so it was a pretty amazing experience. And then after about uh, 3 months of working in that first role, um, there was a bit of a reorganization of the structure, and I ended up working on the same project, but as a field test engineer myself. And so what that was a much more technical role, and it actually was quite perfect for me because um, while there was a lot of technical stuff about the network that I had to learn from scratch, excuse me, um, probably the hardest part about that job was that you needed to be able to distinguish between what issues were being caused by um, problems with your test equipment versus problems, phenomenon on the network that we are actually trying to measure. And my experience, working at a computer store and troubleshooting people's issues really quick was actually like quite a transferable skill there. So that really helped a lot. And then at the same time, while I was doing my own tests, I also had to manage the other people who are testing. So that could get pretty stressful at times. Um, and then hi, and then I also started learning Python at the time, and I started automating some parts of my workflow because it was a lot of work, and it was cool to learn how to do it myself. And that was a big step up in my career. So before I joined Avinton, my vision of my future career, and on the time scale of about 5 years, um, would be something like I did know that I wanted to continue working with technology because as I was working um, in IT in America, I did really enjoy fixing technical problems. Like quite a bit. Um, but the thing that I really did not like about working those kind of jobs was the fact that, you know, that I had to explain over and over again to non-technical people how to do stuff that was really basic for me. So I felt like I wasn't learning anything, and it wasn't an intellectual challenge for me. But as I said, it was kind of some good fundamental skills which have continued to serve me well um, as a programmer. Um, so the reason that I joined Avinton was just because it ended up working out perfectly that I had graduated from Japanese language school, and my visa was running out, and it was the perfect time to join an exciting technological project and a really good company. So I found Avinton via a message that an Avinton employee left in a group for foreigners living in Tokyo. And I decided to pursue that ad, and it turned out to be a great decision. And it was, I knew that I wanted to join when I saw the scale of the project and the novelty of the technology, and also I was really attracted to what an intensely international environment it was. And I was able to learn new skills and grow, challenge myself intellectually in a new environment. I also think it was good for me that my first serious job in Japan was a job where I wasn't always speaking Japanese. That would have been tough for me in the beginning. I got to speak English and Japanese at work, and I still prefer to do that. It just works different parts of my brain and allows me to just kind of enjoy the way I work more. So I like that. Okay, so how did I get involved with the project or the posting that I'm currently working at, which is more technical than my previous one? So the main qualifications that enabled me to join my current position was one, that I had learned Python, and I was supported by Avinton in doing that, but it was primarily my own study. And then also I came to learn, I came to become more familiar with RAN, radio access network configuration and structure, which is an important qualification for the job I'm doing now. So I actually have really good memories of my first posting when I was a field test engineer was out in Chiba, and so in the car in the morning and after work, I would be studying my Python lectures on my computer after I had everything set up, and I was really able to, I worked hard, and I was able to really level up my understanding at that point. And quickly after learning some, doing some lectures and study and whatnot, I was able to get to the point where I was able to start automating things in my life. Started with some of my workflow for my job, and then also my Japanese study habits. I started building tools to automatically find example sentences for my digital flashcards. And again, I learned quite a bit by doing that, because with programming, like any skill, really, I mean, you can only do so much from lectures. It's really when you actually learn is when you do projects yourself. And then simultaneously, my initial testings were relatively untechnically complicated, like basic stuff like how far are these radio waves traveling, do we have enough antennas, kind of thing. And then it became more complicated stuff involving, different layers of our technological stack, and more complicated problems. And by going through these different types of testing, I learned more about the different aspects of the radio access network, and also about the core in some cases, and generally just increase my knowledge of telecoms, general knowledge. which has been helpful up to today. So because of those qualifications, I was able to join this new company as a systems integration engineer. However, I got even more lucky in that basically, with few exceptions, I haven't really been doing systems integration myself. I've kind of been writing automation tools to help other people do system integration, which is something that is far more interesting to me. And so I'm really, really grateful that I was able to have that opportunity, because once I joined my new team, I was presented with some code that was not very well documented, and was kind of like a work in progress, and it was more complicated than anything I'd ever seen before. So struggling to make sense of that and then improve it myself made me a much better programmer. So I was very happy to be able to do that. So in terms of the projects that I've been working on in my current job, there are two big ones and then some other little ones, but the two big ones that I'd like to go over now are the config compare tool, which is the one I was talking about that was in a kind of half completed state when I first saw it, which it was originally constructed as an API, and there were some reasons for that, but there were also some disadvantages to that approach. And so I changed it to be just a locally executed tool. And I changed just the user interface, and I changed, really, I changed everything. And now it's considered very easy to use by the people who are using it. So this tool is basically being used by two separate teams of people now. One of them is the verification team, which basically is the team that confirms that new software will not pose any problems, and so they need a way to update the test nodes to match their verification models. So they're using the tool in their workflow for that, which is a team that is has a crucial function. So that in that respect, the tool has been integrated into a larger automation platform, and there's a chance that that model could spread to be used for other networks around the world. And then more the original purpose, which is for the radio frequency team and the integ team to use it for analysis and troubleshooting, so that they can check if they're seeing some unexpected behavior from one of the nodes. They can check that they can see if there are any parameters that seem to be differing and maybe might be the cause. So it's a really good kind of first troubleshooting tool that can either set you on the right path, or in some cases make it very obvious what the problem might be. And as for basic info, yeah, it's written. This tool was entirely written in Python, and it works on Linux and Windows. So the second tool that I wanted to discuss is the one I'm working on now, which is the status check tool. And basically what the point of this one is that while people are doing network operations, they need to check that this state of the node is matching all of the required items for that particular type of work, because these are actively active commercial nodes. We have to be extremely kichinto, like precise about following all the regulations. So this tool helps us to do that. And this one is going to be used actually by people outside of my company who are working at a different subcontractor. So you have to be kind of, again, very precise about how it's packaged and, how how the documentation is written. So again, it's kind of allowed me to take the next step up in terms of writing, code at a professional standard. And this tool is not only in Python, it's also in our internal scripting language, but it's replacing an older version of the tool, which was written in entirely in our internal scripting language, and then in Perl, which if you've ever seen Perl code, it's extremely hard to read. So it's going to be really good for us long term to have it written in Python so that we can easily update it when we need to accommodate new hardware and software. And then we can also more easily troubleshoot it if we get any reports of unexpected behavior from the teams that are using it. So in terms of the basic skills that I've been able to acquire in this project up to now, well, the main one I would say is a deeper understanding of Python itself. I would say that it's a general purpose language. There's so many different things that you can do with it. So, I could never really say that I'm an expert in all things, but I have a really strong foundation in it. And I can understand most topics to some level as far as they relate to Python. And then the next thing would be that I've gotten much more familiar with Linux. All of our servers run on Linux, and our internal scripting environment is also a Linux environment. And so I've become a big fan of Linux. I run Linux on my home computers, not exclusively, but certainly when I'm developing, I tend to use Linux. So I've been able to become much more familiar with that. Also, I've gotten more familiar with the general RAN architecture. It's been, I think it was kind of interesting in that my previous position was kind of it was based around a more modern kind of experimental RAN architecture, which a lot of like the educational materials about it are kind of like making analogy to the older, more traditional RAN architecture. So it was a little hard for me to follow what was going on in some of those cases. And now, not to say that my current my current company is also has very cutting edge technologies and architectures, but it's a little more grounded in the traditional model, which has been really helpful for me to understand what the basic RAN architecture is. So I've gotten a lot better at understanding that. And then the other tools that are used a little bit less by me particularly, but by other people in my team, and I have to be able to understand them to some extent, is C# and .NET. Most of the tools that my team works on are written in C# and .NET. I haven't been assigned one of them for more than a couple days yet, so I certainly would consider myself pretty limited in that, but I can understand it to some degree, and I would like to learn more. Same with bash scripting. If it were me, I prefer to just, open up Python and do it in Python, but it is important to be able to understand bash scripting to some extent. A lot of Python commands are just running bash commands in the background, so, probably the most important thing that I've learned is really just to think like a programmer. because we can talk about all these tools, and of course tools are really important, having good tool knowledge, but really they are tools, and it's more, any tool that you're going to use is basically uh, just a way of working with the fundamental problem that you're dealing with, which is that computers don't think like humans. They do exactly what you tell them, and they're not intelligent. They're just, things that can do math really fast, and you have to find the way to break down the steps that you want to do into something that someone with no intelligence, something with no intelligence can understand. And that's, an unnatural way for humans to think. And so, if until you start programming, you don't really know how to do that. And so I've been able to learn that kind of way of thinking. And so that is probably what I would consider the most valuable skill. And then also, I've worked a little bit with code design patterns. I haven't had to do with that so much because Python, I think, encourages pretty good design. You don't have to go too deep into some of the object-oriented stuff, but I've thought a lot about it, and so I've learned a lot about that. And then also my general troubleshooting continues to be something that is useful for working with programming and also working with, troubleshooting network problems as well. Okay, so next I'd like to discuss a little bit about what I'd like to do going forward in my career. Um, I think it's pretty clear at this point that I really do enjoy software development, and so I'd like to continue with that. And of course, there are problems for which Python is not the best suited tool for the job. And also, just in terms of, even for times when I do want to use Python, I would probably be able to understand, have a deeper understanding if I also had skills in other languages. The main ones that kind of strike my fancy are Rust and Go. Rust is basically, the kind of candidate to be the modern replacement for C. It's a really well-designed language with a lot of really great features, and it's something that I'd like to look at. But it is, because it's a low-level systems language, it is quite a bit more complicated than Python. You have to think about memory management yourself, so it's definitely a different way of thinking. And then the other one is Go, which is Google's language, which is designed with concurrency in mind. And so it's what Docker is built in, and Kubernetes. And so it's a very, very important language in cloud architecture in general. And it's also just considered a very well thought out and well designed language. I would also be interested in C#, Kotlin, etc. But those are the two that I think I'm really into. And I'd like to be able to eventually maybe write code that's not specifically related to telecoms, some other interesting problems. I've worked a little bit with natural language processing and machine learning. Haven't really gotten too far out of, working with educational materials on that. I've been thinking about integrating it into some of my personal projects for Japanese language learning, but I haven't really gotten to that yet. Yeah, and also the other thing that I would mention is that I would like to eventually work on software where user experience is a little bit more of a core requirement, because when we're working in back-end business software, it's great if you can include a nice user experience, but it's not the main requirement. And I actually have found that I really enjoy building software that I actually like to use. So it would be cool to eventually be in a position where that's a little bit more of a core requirement. And I think that's just about it for today. thanks a lot for joining, and I'd like to thank Avinton for um, helping me on this journey, and looking forward to continuing.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So, working hard and earning your position in the project can benefit your career and project as well. We are very impressed your hard work and attention to details. If you are interested in our AI project or career in IT industry, please feel free to contact us and follow our SNS. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel too. Thank you so much.